Hurricane Ian, a borderline Category 5 hurricane, making landfall along the Florida west coast near Port Charlotte Harbor, Punta Gorda, Sanibel Island. And we're going to have coverage of this as we look at satellites, radars, and much more, including what could possibly be a second landfall down the short road along the southeast coast, and maybe some rain implications further up the coast for the mid-Atlantic up into southern New England. All of that and much more on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, the special Joe and Joe Weather Show, the noontime Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey tri-state area. Great place to go if you got to make sure you've got what you need to be protected in tropical storm or hurricane. In case we ever get one here in the Northeast and you need a new generator, sump pump, flashlight, batteries, they got it. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. So, Joe Rayo, yesterday on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, we certainly noticed the fact that eye wall was shrinking and shrinking, a sure indication that this was going to strengthen. And then I woke up this morning right around advisory time and at 5 a.m. and saw that they were carrying 155 miles an hour and that the pressure had dropped down to from 953, I think it was when we did the show last night, to 937. The rapid strengthening that began yesterday continued right into this morning. Now we've got the storm virtually on land, and the worst of it in those places I mentioned just a moment ago.
Well, Joe, I've been hearing, news anchors this morning talking about, well, it's verging on a Category 5. You want to know what? It really doesn't matter if it's verging on a Category 5, because as it is right now, it is a very, very dangerous, a very destructive storm. This is going to do a lot of damage to a lot of places, unfortunately, along the West Coast and also into Central Florida. We're talking about tremendous wind. We're talking about tremendous tidal surge, storm surge associated with this system, and also tremendous amounts of rain. Many areas, before this is all over, said and done, are going to see at least a foot of rain out of this, and in some cases maybe upwards to near 20 inches of rain. No question about that this storm, Ian, is going to be one of the most memorable and one of the most destructive hurricanes that we've seen in the last decade, even including storms that we have seen in the last decade like Maria. And even from last week, we saw all that destruction that happened with Fiona in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and on up into Atlantic Canada. But this storm is going to be near the top of the list. And all I could say is to that dummy, and I'm trying to tamp down my adjectives here. That dummy who was on our chat board last week bemoaning the fact that, in his opinion, this hurricane season was going to be a bust. Well, I hope you're getting your jollies. I hope everybody in Puerto Rico, in the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Atlantic Canada, and now with this particular storm, agrees with you on this being a bust. If anything, this is turning out to be, despite a very quiet July and August, this is turning out to be a wild and woolly September. And we're not done. We're not done with September. And Lord only knows what we're going to see when we move into October. Maybe nature is going to try to make up for all the time lost during July and August. But that only goes to show you that you never can tell with tropical storm and hurricanes. Quiet, yes, but maybe they're just waiting and lurking to suddenly explode. And this season certainly, Joe, has exploded in the matter of the last week or 10 days.
And I pulled up, you're going to do the radars and talk about the storm surge. I pulled up the satellite loop. I just switched over to the radar. You can see that the eastern edge of the eye wall is just on the coast now, in that area there. That's Port Charlotte Harbor, and you mentioned about the storm surge, and I just again want to illustrate the rather unusual issue that sets up here, having a storm coming in from the west, pretty much on the west coast of Florida, is a problem when it comes to coastal flooding in the areas that are to the east and southeast of the center, because these areas, the winds here are from the south, southeast, or south. Well, guess what? The water, the Gulf of Mexico water, pours into the harbor, and then after, if we're taking a north-northeast track, eventually that wind is going to shift to the west. Well, guess what? The water in the harbors are fighting a west wind, and we're not talking about, a little zephyr here. We are talking about hurricane force winds when the winds shift to the west, which just keeps pushing more water into the harbor. So I would expect that the tidal flooding here is going to be substantial and memorable historically for some of these areas. They have not seen anything here of consequence really since Hurricane Irma, yes, to an extent, but I'm talking about a direct landfall of a major like this. You have to go back to Hurricane Charlie in 2003, and that was a different type of storm too, because that was more wind than anything else, because it was very, very small relative to this. And the other thing I just point out on the loop here, on the satellite loop with the lightning strikes. Now, you see they sort of fade a little bit, and I don't want to read too much into it. Whether there's an eye wall replacement cycle that might be going on, which if it is and is happening as it approaches the coast, might make a little bit of a difference in terms of that peak intensity, bringing it down just a notch. But make no mistake here, whether you're talking about a Category 4 hurricane or, as you said, Joe, borderline Category 5, this is going to be destructive, and regardless. So you don't want to put too much emphasis on the fact that, well, there's an eye wall replacement cycle going on, the system is weakening. The strength is going to fluctuate. It'll be on land this afternoon, so the worst of it is underway. There's not going to be a whole lot that's going to change very much, eye wall replacement cycle or no.
And the most impressive thing to me on that view that you're showing right now, Joe, is that at one point we have several frames in the loop where the eye of the storm is completely encircled by convective activity. I mean, a ring of convection ranging anywhere from moderate to very strong thunderstorm activity. I mean, this is a classic. This is a classic demonstration of a major may I use the term cataclysmic? Yes, I could use that. Cataclysmic type storm system with, again, very strong Cat 4 or verging on a 5, but it really doesn't matter because this is going to be one major. And I was doing my impression yesterday and the day before of people who say, well, I've weathered all kinds of storms and I'm going to stick around. I don't think there's going to be much of a problem with this storm Ian and blah, blah, blah. Well, we have on the chat board here, William Jersey Shore, and he comments that he just took a look on the Weather Channel, and the Weather Channel was showing people standing on a pier in Naples, Florida. And William Jersey Shore asks, what are these people thinking? The mayor should prohibit people from going on that pier. They could be swept away. Some people, unfortunately, have to learn the hard way. And I'm sorry to say those dummies that are on that pier in Naples, Florida, if they don't get out of there fast,
was that a live?
They're going to learn the hard way.
I wonder if that was live or maybe it was taped earlier. Let's hope that it was taped earlier and they were chased out.
Let's hope so, that maybe some of these people said, oh, let me take a last look before I get the hell out of here. But if it was live.
Joe, I got to imagine that must have been taped earlier. It can't be. I can't imagine.
But even if it was taped earlier, for goodness sake, what the hell are you still doing there? You should have gotten out of there yesterday or the day before. It boggles the mind, Joe, that there are some people who are so stubborn that they just declare, I'm staying here. I don't care what anybody tells me. And, they have to learn the hard way.
Right. You've got the surge stuff.
What would you like to see first, the surge or the radar?
Well, let's do the surge stuff because I'm just going to have my own minor little rant while you do the surge stuff because it's related to that.
Okay, you have to allow me to share because it says host is disabled. But I know you've been doing all kinds of stuff this morning, and so a few little things may.
One forgot.
One forgot.
So if you think back, if you watched the show back days ago when we were talking about this, we were talking about all the dry air that was up in northern Florida getting entrained in circulation. And that, remember, that would have happened and weakened this storm had it taken that track up the coast, offshore, toward the Florida Panhandle, or even into the Big Bend. But it never did that. It is staying well south of where that dry air is. And if you see on the loop, we don't see any evidence at all of that dry air getting entrained. And this was, we pointed out that if it takes this kind of route where it goes into southwest Florida, it was going to be a big problem. And I'm just bringing that up, not because I'm trying to say, oh, well, what a wonderful prediction that was, because it was. But no. But the point is, when you're digesting all this weather information, you have to understand how tenuous sometimes the forecast can be with all these different factors that are at play. And it's a good idea to put all those factors on the table so that you understand what is happening and you make a good decision. And the good decision is you evacuate, even if you think that, well, maybe it might weaken. You pray that it will, but you can't live on prayer and hope. You have to look at the reality. The reality at this was it was going to go in. We became pretty evident yesterday when we made the turn north and then east of due north that this was not going to go up toward Tampa Bay. This was not going to go to the Florida Big Bend, but it was headed right for Southwest Florida in that zone. Rayo, the board is yours.
And we talk about last night. If those of you who were on with us on Joe and Joe last night, and we were showing the storm surge map, we noted that in the most significant region, the purple region, they were talking about storm surge of 8 to 12 feet. Well, guess what? Now, based upon the latest data and the fact that the storm has revved up even more so, now from Englewood, Florida, south to Bonita Beach, they are now calling for a storm surge of 12 to 18 feet. That is unfrickin' believable. And then further south, from Bonita Beach to Chicoloshi, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, well, I apologize. 8 to 12 foot storm surge, and also from Englewood to Chocoloki,
okay. Florida.
Okay, Chocoloki, Florida to Bonita Beach, you're 8 to 12 feet. So now what was last night the peak or maximum of 8 to 12, well, now you're only a second, or you're running second there with as compared to Bonita Beach to Englewood. And from Englewood to the middle of Longboat Key, 6 to 10 foot storm surge anticipated, and it gets less as you go further to the north or further to the south. But right here is where you do not want to be. This is where, again, the worst of it is going to be in the coming hours. I should also point out, Joe, that we had a new moon a couple of days ago. In fact, the reason we had Rosh Hashanah usually coincides with the new moon of September. We had that a couple of days ago, but that's not good because usually, as we've often mentioned, there's a tidal lag between the lunar phase and what actually transpires in terms of high tides. So the highest tides are coming right now, thanks to the pull of that new moon, and that. Joe, what timing? Timing?
I know. Let me interrupt you for 1 second because thanks, Michael Reese. I have here the Earth Cam from said pier in Naples, okay? And you can take a look. I mean, we've got the eye wall on the coast. Now, bear in mind that, well, the eye is going to go north of Naples, but they're getting that west wind underneath, and you can see what's happening here with the water. This, just to give credit, this is the Earth Cam live from Naples, Florida at the pier. So we will safely assume that those people were there earlier, and it looks like there's no one there. So either they were they were there earlier and left, they were escorted off the pier and left, or they've been washed away. I don't know which of the three, but I mean, Joe, look at and look how with the pier, we can't really gain perspective, but I think if you look carefully out, you could see how far that pier goes out a fair distance, and so I'm thinking that that's all beach that's gone. That water is well past where the water line normally is, And also remember, by the way, in the Gulf of Mexico with these hurricanes, the waves are not as on the Atlantic side. There's always bigger waves on the Atlantic side, and the surge is a little bit less. On the Gulf of Mexico side, it's the opposite. There, the waves are not. You're not getting 30-foot waves crashing into the beach, but the storm surge, because of the shallow nature of the shore of the shelf offshore, allows the water to really just push in much further than you would see on the Atlantic side.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a very, very impressive. And yeah, that pier goes way out. That pier goes way. And yeah, I would hope, Joe, that the people who were there maybe a few hours ago have now decided, well, this isn't. I've gotten my jollies out of this. I'm getting the heck out of here now. But even that, they should have been out a long time ago. So that's a very impressive. It's going to be interesting to see if we continue to have that view through the next few hours, and whether or not either the wind or maybe a major surge in the water causes to knock out that cam. But it is impressive. It is very impressive.
Right, I'm going to search for a couple of more in the meantime. So go ahead back to the surge map, and then you could go ahead into the radars. And if I have something, I will let you know.
Well, you could see again that most of the action, as you would expect, with the eye of the storm located right about here, right now, that most of the action is indeed taking place along the west coast of Florida. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of Florida is out in the clear. In fact, you can see that from Patrick Air Force Base, which is just a stone's throw away from the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, from Patrick Air Force Base north to Flagler and Volusia County line, 1 to 3 foot surge is expected. And then you go north of Flagler and you go up into the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina, and you have storm surges there of 3 to 5 feet. And normally you talk about a storm surge, you talk about a 5-foot surge, and you say, "My God, that's very intense." And yet it seemingly doesn't hold a candle to, again, what we just looked at on the West Coast, the 12 to 18-foot surge anticipated from Charlotte Harbor north to, from Bonita Beach north to Englewood. So that's the view of the storm surge. Now let's take a look at the radar, and to do that, I'm going to have to go back to Mr. Chiaffi's a Zoom link here, so I can make a choice as to what camera. Oh, I see what I'm doing here. Hold on for a second. I'm trying to get to.
By the way, we should point out too, when we're looking at this with the whole idea of the storm surge, at least initially in areas that are getting an east wind, where the center is going to the north of the center, and those places are getting an east wind, you could almost call it a negative surge. The water's being blown out. Okay, it's being blown away from the coast. It's a little hard to sort of imagine this because of how we deal with approaching storms on the East Coast and in the Northeast versus what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico here in the Eastern Gulf. But there's the opposite happening, at least initially. Now, once the storm goes by and the winds turn in the other direction, that water's going to come in. But it's going to be along and south of the track where you're going to have the strongest surge.
And you can see here, Joe, we have, I believe this is the Tampa radar, and you could see pretty much where the eye is. And there's that, I noted earlier, that concentric or almost unbroken circle of convection around the eye. And there it is. You could see it in the yellows and the oranges, which almost completely encircle on this radar view the eye of the storm. And it looks like the eye is moving kind of like on a 20-degree or northeast trek, and it looks like that within the next few hours it will probably be making landfall somewhere around here on the west coast of Florida. And you can see the spiral bands of moderate to heavy activity that are well away from the eye of the storm. And even out here on the east coast of Florida, you can see how the storm is really wrapping up now, with, again, winds on average of 130 or 100, close to 150 mile winds. Let's take a look at the Melbourne Melbourne radar on the East Coast. And you can see here again some of the outer bands streaming off of the Atlantic Ocean and then moving inland on a northwest trajectory to, I believe here's where Cape Canaveral is. You know, the Artemis moon rocket that they've been trying to launch to the moon over the past few weeks, they had to roll that rocket back into the vehicle assembly building at Cape Canaveral because of the strong winds and heavy rains anticipated in advance of Ian. And I think they did a very good job in doing so and making a very good decision, because as you can see, one of those outer bands is moving right over the Cape right now with moderate to heavy rain activity. Let's see another radar. We'll go down to Key West now. And this is a nice looking shot. Here you see the eye of the storm, a different perspective. And as you can see, as the winds and rain swirl around in a counterclockwise fashion, you can see that some of those outer bands are also hitting the Florida Keys right here, moving on a trek mostly to the east northeast, up along the Keys and on toward South Florida. And let's see, I believe Melbourne is right about here, and further north is Miami Beach. So there it is. There's the storm continuing again on that northeasterly track, packing winds of 150, 155 mile per hour sustained just outside the eye wall around the center. And again, that eye wall, Joe, that eye itself looks to be relatively wider now than it did last night. It looked like it was compressing or shrinking, but it looks like it's at least, I would say 20 miles or so wide right now.
Yeah,
seems that way. It seems that way on this radar view here.
Hang on, just a second. Let me just check on the 11 o'clock advisory, which we have. Moving north, they're carrying north at 9. No, I'm sorry, that's the new tropical depression that's formed out in the Atlantic that's expected to be short-lived. 26.4 north, 82.5 west, northeast at 9. They're still carrying 937 millibars. There's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that is on the way, a new mission. One flies in, goes out, new one comes in. So there's almost continuous coverage there. 155 on the advisory. And they are carrying, let's see, the diameter of the eye is estimated at 30 nautical miles. Hurricane force winds 40 northeast, 40 southeast, 30 southwest, 40 northwest, 50 knots, 70 northeast, 60 southeast, 70 southwest, and 80 northwest. And gales go out 120 northeast, 140 southeast, and there seems to be more and more of a tilt in the southeast quad, 100 southwest and 150 northwest. So those are the dimensions here with regards to Ian, and it is forecast after landfall to weaken. But on its first inland plot from the Hurricane Center, when it's at 27.3 and 82.1, which is just inland, the top wind's down to 105 knots. So I'm still a Category 3 as it works its way inland. And then we'll go through the rest of the forecast in just a bit. I was trying to look here, Joe. One of the problems with these live cams is some of them require you to have license for them. They're copyrighted, so I'm going through a few of them. I think I found one that we could use, but I certainly want to give credit here. A live cam from Sanibel Island that's called Hurricane Ian Watch as it nears a Category 5. There's actually 4 different shots here, and the one shot that's probably the most meaningful, I think, they're all meaningful, but I'm going to switch over now so we can take a look at it. And, this is off of YouTube, so hopefully I won't get in any trouble for using it. But you can see on the lower right, that's got to be surge what's coming in. And it's coming in a big way here because, again, it's that west wind that's pushing in the water. And that's just getting started with regards to surge.
And that view just before you switch to the quadrant of cameras here, the view of the radar, I had switched over to Tallahassee just to show that
let me give it back to you.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay, so this view is from Tallahassee in the panhandle of Florida, and I'm just showing this to show you the northwest periphery of the outer rain bands from Ian. You can see it's very sharp. I mean, my goodness, it's almost knife sharp. But you can also see that the rains are moving ever so slowly, but they are moving toward the north and west. So while the panhandle for the moment is out of it in terms of any precipitation of any significance, you can bet your bottom dollar that as the storm continues to move on that north-northeast trajectory, that eventually this first band of heavy rain is going to move far enough to the north and west to envelop a good part of the panhandle. I think the only part of Florida that does not have any kind of hurricane or tropical cyclone advisory, watch, or warning is the extreme western end of the panhandle, where they don't expect any of the major effects from the storm to reach them. But it's only going to go, the outermost rain band here is only going to get so far to the north and west, reaching probably Tallahassee and maybe a bit further to the west, and then it's going to stop as the storm continues on that north-northeast track. Eventually it will get to a certain point and then will backtrack or move away and out of the panhandle region. But for the moment, you can see again that very, very sharp knife edge edge of the outermost periphery of one of the rain bands, the northwest rain bands, again, slowly but surely moving north and west. And if I want to check one more, I think Joe, we've just about looked at all of the radars, at least on the west side and on the east side. We looked at Melbourne.
Yes.
Let's take a look quickly at Jacksonville.
All right. While you're pulling that up, Joe, take a look at. I got this is from Daniel Beach. Thank you, Michael Reese, for the camera suggestions. This is the webcam from Daniel Beach, and you can see what's happening here with the shore. They just had the camera on a pier shot, and they moved it. So let's see if they swing it around. But you can kind of see on the lower left that water is getting awfully close to the bottom of the pier. I'm hoping that they widen out a bit here. But in the meantime, nobody's at the water fountain, so that's a good thing.
No.
And, here's a beach shot here. You can see how the water. Again, I'm trying to gain perspective. It's hard to figure out where exactly the water line is because I haven't looked at this camera. This is a first time look for me. But it would seem to me that the water is past the water line, and there's the pier shot here. The waves just probably coming up to the bottom of the pier, and remember, the eye is now making its way onto the shoreline, so they've got hours and hours of this to go. So it's not, we're not at a peak here. And here's a view, I guess, looking out of the pier, and you can see the waves starting to hit. There's still some room there to get to the top, but not a whole lot of room to get to the top of that pier. So, all right, I just wanted to do that, and let's. I'm testing the resources here, Joe, because I have so many windows open. I gotta get rid of this so we don't have any more nasty interference. So it's all back to you with the Jacksonville radar. And by the way, just a note, I'm in Boynton Beach at the moment. I'm on the East Coast. And I just want to make it clear again, I'm not here chasing. Not that there's anything wrong with chasing, but I just want to be honest about it. I'm not here chasing. I'm here for family reasons, and I was going to be here regardless. It just by coincidence, it turns out that we were getting a major hurricane. Not surprised that it's happened because I can't have an easy week. I always have to have things complicated. But we had, Joe, last night we had a lot of thunderstorms, quite a bit of rain, and a lot of tornado warnings that went up starting in the evening hours and during the part of the overnight. But much of today, actually, I mean, it's been windy, and we've got gales here. I think we've probably had some gusts to 40 or 50 miles an hour at times. But it's been mostly dry. In fact, every once in a while, the sky brightens up and the sun comes out. So those bands have now moved north of me, and I'm kind of in a bit of a dry slot. Now you can go ahead and talk about the Melbourne radar.
Well, actually, right now, this is the Jacksonville radar that we're looking at.
Jacksonville.
And you can see that everywhere to the south and to the southwest of Jacksonville, and also to the east out over the ocean, there is precipitation, courtesy of Ian, but to the north and west, up across toward the Panhandle, as we saw on the Tallahassee radar, and also across Georgia, there is, for the moment, nothing but dry weather, dry conditions. So, again, this is the northern periphery of Ian, and I'm sure that in the hours to come, as the storm continues on a north-northeast trajectory, we will eventually see not just the rest of Florida, but also right on up into southern or lower sections of Georgia getting some significant rainfall again from Ian. And Joe, I think I've covered just about all of the radars that
You are
across Florida.
you are radared out, sir.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Well, I mean, I could show you, for example, up here. I mean, we don't have a cloud in the sky up in the New York City area. It's one of the nicest days we've had all through the summer and into the early fall. And as you can see, nothing to show on the radar out of Upton, save for a little bit of ground clutter. But it is a beautiful, beautiful day here, and I wish it could be that way down in Florida, but unfortunately, it is not.
I was going to say, not a flake, not, as I always like to say, especially in the wintertime when you forecast snow and it doesn't happen, not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing.
Nothing.
Not your way. Okay, let's look at the hurricane track guidance. So start to focus. Let's talk about the next possibilities, which is for potential, excuse me, for a second landfall in the southeast coast, Georgia, South Carolina. Looks like the likely candidates here, as all of the hurricane tracking models are doing this. What is key to whether the rain makes it up the coast and how far north that rain gets? Well, there are two things to pay attention to. One is whether what happens to the core of this when it goes inland. Does the core hold together, or does the core wind up just sort of getting shredded apart? And yeah, you get some rain, but it's nothing crazy. It's when the core of a tropical system, and oftentimes the cores of these big, these powerful Category 4s and 5s, the cores wind up holding together a lot better than what the models show. So I want to be a little cautious here with regards to that possibility that the core holds together. And it's when you get, though, the core to go over you, like it did with Ida, for example, that you get those devastating rains. And I think we have to pay attention to whether the models are correct on this or not. I would point out that what comes into the southeast coast is literally going to, in terms of strength, is going to depend on whether the track is along the lines of those left-leaning models where it goes back out of the open waters, but just barely so, and then comes back in on the near the South Carolina Georgia border, or just to the left of that, or does it do a track like those models colored in blue, the EGR2 and the UK Met 2 model? And I would point out, Joe, that those two models, along with one or a third model, which is the one that you see here that goes all the way up into Maryland and then turns straight east into southern New Jersey, I believe that's called the COTI-1. These were among the first models early yesterday that showed the storm taking the more eastward track. So I want to kind of pay attention to that, because they were right with the outcome here, being along where it is in Southwest Florida. So maybe they've got something here with the idea that it goes further out before making the turn and comes inland towards Charleston. If we get that wider swing out, I would expect to see this strengthen again. Maybe it depends on what we have coming out the other side, but let's assume it comes out as either a minimal hurricane or a strong tropical storm. I don't think it'll be weaker than that. You could have this re-strengthen a little bit if you takes that further eastern route, that you could have a Category 1 or maybe even outside chance of a low-grade Category 2 hurricane coming in along the Carolina coast. So whether it swings out or not is going to have an impact in terms of the intensity. And actually, if you look closely here, you've got some of the intensity models kind of holding on to Cat 2 status and then kind of leaving it there. Now, I don't know what the corresponding surface that goes with it. I'm trying to visualize this because they have it as a Cat 2 and leaving it there. So maybe these models, which aren't showing up on the plots, are ones that take it out to the east, but maybe keep it offshore. I don't know. You can see the vast majority of models weaken this to a tropical storm and keep it as a tropical storm through 84 hours before they weaken it further. So these models probably are saying, yeah, it comes out, but then it turns sharply northward and then goes, inland. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time over water, so it doesn't have a lot of time to strengthen. And I think those are the keys to watch. And with respect to the East Coast, now here, this is where it gets tricky. You have this upper trough in the east. This is for 2 o'clock this afternoon. And of course, here we've got Ian and the upper air feature of this. So we've got these lovely winds in the upper atmosphere down to South Carolina, maybe even a little further south than that, that are blowing northwest to southeast and then turn east and then northeast. That's the direction they're going from. They're actually west-southwest winds in the upper atmosphere. So if that trough were to stay there, Ian would probably cross Florida off the coast and then head out to sea. But of course, nothing is static in the atmosphere. That trough is forecast to lift out and weaken. It does not pick up Ian because Ian is not far enough north to get caught by it. And it's kind of left in this sort of no man's land, and it just drifts up. The upper feature drifts up into South Carolina, Georgia, and eventually finds its way into northeastern Georgia, southwestern North Carolina. And then over time, over the weekend, it tries to lift up, Joe. It's very interesting on the GFS. It tries to lift up toward West Virginia, but then it just kind of comes to a stop and drifts southward again because of what's going on in eastern Canada. And that is there's a short wave on the upper right. You can see it. There's a short wave that's swinging southeastward up in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Labrador, and that actually helps to suppress this further south. And we know on the surface, we talked about yesterday, there's a second big high that's coming down. So I think ultimately the question becomes how far north does the rain get before this whole thing just winds up getting kicked out to the east, which it will get kicked out to the east eventually, sometime maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. So on the new GFS, this is the new 12Z run of the GFS. You can see what this one's doing, and then we'll look at the icon because the icon apparently has been the home run hitter this time around. Keeps it tucked in more at the coast. Still gets that pressure down to about 989. So I mean that would be the equivalent maybe of a very strong tropical storm. Top winds are 60 or 70 miles an hour. The surface low goes inland northwest under the upper low, but there's rain that moves up the coast. It gets to just north of New York City Saturday afternoon before the next high begins to start pushing down. And the rain, this is the radar presentation. It has rain cutting off, Joe, right at your house, and then dropping southeastward, and out it goes. And there's nothing come Sunday night into Monday, and most of the precip with it is kept south and east. The Icon model, which again has been the big home run hitter with this, we'll roll this back. The Icon model has a bit more of an easterly component when it moves off the Florida coast. Pressure at 989, so it says it weakens to barely under hurricane strength. Then kind of hooks out a little bit and goes in just west of Charleston. Pressure down to about 9. If you believe the Icon, Joe, gets down to almost 960, which would suggest a strong Cat 2. And then up into the Western Carolinas, the first surge of rain moves up. You could see the indications of it starting to dry out, but it doesn't get in until late Saturday afternoon or evening. If you drew a line, say, from northeast Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, certainly earlier for southern New Jersey. But you can see one batch goes out, one batch gets left back, and still has the low off the Virginia coast. And actually, Joe, that's a pretty tight gradient that's set up there on Monday with a low that's sitting east of the Virginia Capes and a 1030-ish high, a 1028, 1029 high up in on the St. Lawrence River. That's a fairly tight gradient that's showing up on the icon there.
I would agree. And if you could kick it back to me, I'd like to show everybody yet a third possibility, and that is from the NAM. We haven't spoken at all about what the NAM is saying about this storm, but I think this is rather interesting, Joe, that what the NAM is forecasting for this particular system. Right now, we're at 12 noon. We're actually coming up on 1 o'clock, and if once we're on my screen here,
which you
showing
are.
the NAM, which you are here it is. So here's the NAM situation, a 970 low pressure system, just about ready to make landfall now. And then as we move things along quickly here, you could see it cutting across central Florida. It's down to like a 992. And then it looks like it's going to move just over Cape Canaveral. This would place it, let's see, 18Z Thursday. This would be 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. It is located, or 2 or 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. It's over Cape Canaveral, getting ready to move back out over the Atlantic Ocean. So now, what does the NAM do? Does the NAM keep it hugging the coastline, or does it take it well out over the ocean? Well, take a look. And as it moves out over the ocean, it gets progressively stronger. Joe, it's got it down to, at this particular point in time, a 973 low, now a 970 low. Now this is 18Z Friday. This is 2 o'clock Friday afternoon, and the NAM has this storm just a stone's throw to the south and east of Charleston, South Carolina, with landfall right about at Charleston, South Carolina, as a 971 millibar hurricane at 21Z. That would be 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. Then the storm moves out and across South Carolina into western North Carolina. Still, the center is quite evident here. Saturday, Sunday, 0Z, that's 8 o'clock on Sunday. It's in lower West Virginia. And I might also point out to the baseball fans, Joe, especially those Met and Brave fans who are looking toward, excuse me, the big 3-game series between the Braves and the Mets, which could decide the National League Eastern Division crown this weekend. And the concern has been all along, well, can they move to a neutral site? How many games are going to be rained out? Will they have to play back-to-back days, a doubleheader and another single game? All of this because of the concern of heavy rain in the Atlanta area. Well, here's Atlanta right here. And if you believe and take at face value the NAM, take a look at this. The NAM indicates that none of the rain from Ian will affect the Atlanta area, and they could play all 3 games this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, without any concern from precipitation. Quite a difference from yesterday and the day before, when it looked like heavy rains would fall over. But that's only the NAM's solution there. So
right.
There you go.
Well, look, I would also point out the NAM and the icon actually are not that different. They are very close. And the reason why it's not going to rain in Atlanta, according to the models, if you have a system, if Ian, when it comes out, does a little bit more of an offshore swing and maintains an entity as a minimal Category 1 hurricane, then you're going to have a very sharp northern cutoff of where the rain gets. And that's what those models are saying. And it makes sense. If you're going to have a more wrapped up system, there's going to be a sharp cutoff. You're not going to have a weakening system where the rain starts to fan out. I mean, eventually you will, but it'll be further east and northeast and not to the northwest. And actually, if we look at the GFS, Joe, even the GFS says the rain, there's no rain. I mean, the rain eventually on the GFS, because of the fact that it takes it inland on the South Carolina Georgia border, and the core low is moving northwestward. This brings rain by early Saturday morning into Atlanta. The Friday night game would be okay, and then there would be rain Saturday morning. But you know what? After that, it all lifts up, and you see improvement Saturday afternoon and Saturday night, hoping that's a night game, and then Sunday looks fine. So I think they're going to be, like you. I'm kind of leaning to the idea that this might be a little more offshore, and that a little more wrapped up overall. And we'll see what kind of consequences that leads to as far as later in the weekend and early next week. I forgot to bring myself back on the screen, but there I am.
Yeah.
There I am. So here we are. It's 12:45 Eastern time. I do have just a couple of other maps I want to show. You can give your voice a little bit of a rest. But here's again, just this is the new GFS. I'll just run it real quick on the surface and then get to a couple other things I wanted to show you. But you can see it's a little further to the left, and that arc of rain goes back into North Georgia and eastern Tennessee. And then, of course, you see the rain coming up the East Coast to about just north of New York City, just north of Scranton, or just near Scranton in Pennsylvania, Kingston or Poughkeepsie in the Hudson Valley, southernmost Connecticut, and then just kind of gets cut off and slides out to the east. The latest reconnaissance aircraft is not there yet, or at least according to Tropical Tidbits, it's not there yet, but getting close. The latest radar, which I have from Tampa, and the eye looks like it's right on. Certainly, the eastern edge of the eye wall now has crossed Sanibel Island and is in Port Charlotte Harbor, and the rest of the eye wall is getting ready to move inland. Sometimes these things, when they're this intense and they get toward land, and there's a satellite loop that I think I still have. I don't think I got rid of it, of Hurricane Irma, where the center was literally bouncing off the north coast of Cuba. Every time it tried to kind of cross and move inland, it would hit the land, and the associated friction between the storm and what's caused by the landmass actually caused the eye to look like it was bouncing along. And sometimes that happens. There's a little bit of a hesitation coming onto land because of those two forces working against each other, and eventually the motion force winds up winning the day, and the system moves inland. The Hurricane Center's rainfall forecast, actually WPC's forecast rainfall amounts, and I want to respect what WPC's been showing when we're talking about the East, because of the fact that they have been sort of hinting on their forecast for days and days now that this was going to be more of a track at least up the east side of the Appalachians, and rather than going as far to the west as what some of the global models were doing, like the European taking a load of Evansville, Indiana on several runs. So they have a rather bullish rainfall forecast through next Wednesday morning. This is the 7-day period. It may not rain through Wednesday morning, but they've got 4-inch plus rains to central and southern New Jersey and points southward. The 1-inch rain line is just north of New York City into northern New Jersey. Looks like 1.5 inches, 2 inches for Long Island, 1.5 inches, 2 inches for southern Pennsylvania. And then you see the big rain amounts down in Virginia and into North Carolina, especially near the coast, where we were looking at 5 inches plus. And then, of course, you have the rainfall forecast for Ian. And bear in mind that at least for Florida, this does not include. This was the forecast created this morning at 7 a.m. So anything that fell overnight is not part of this. And believe me, some places got heavy rains, at least, some places several inches of rain overnight. So this is in addition to what's already fallen. So that area of red that is running along and north of the storm track, the center track, 10 to 15 inches of rain forecast, and that includes Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa. Tampa and Tampa Bay here, all part of the 10 to 15 inch zone, and a small area of purple there northeast of Orlando, 15 to 20 inches of rain. Now, some of these areas are only starting to rain now, so those areas that would be total rainfall. As opposed to, say, down near the further south and west, where it doesn't count what fell overnight. So I will bring us back. Let me bring myself back full screen here.
A couple of people on the chat board, Joe, are asking, and I I think we both would agree on the answer. Are you guys? You're on now at noontime. Are you going to have your regular 7:30 show tonight? And I do believe we will, won't we?
Yes. It may not be as long as it might usually be, but we will definitely have a show tonight at 7:30 Eastern, so we can update what's been going on, and we'll have new model views. But I think we have a pretty rough idea of how this is going to play out. It's just trying to figure out the specifics. Thomas Giovanello, what's stopping the storm from re-strengthening when it moves east of the Florida coast and then moving into the Carolinas? Thomas, the answer to your question is, and you might have already caught it in the discussion, it depends on how far out offshore it gets. It needs to get far enough offshore where the circulation, I would say if 3/4 of the circulation is over water and only a quarter of it is on land, you probably will get some strengthening. I don't think it ever gets back to the super intensity that we've seen this morning and overnight and this morning. But could it get back to a Category 1? Sure. If it's far enough east before it turns back northward toward the coast, could it get to maybe a strong Category 1 or even a low-grade Category 2? I think that's possible. If it's tucked in when it goes offshore and goes into the Georgia coast near Savannah, for example, it's probably going to have a tougher time strengthening. It might kind of hold its own as a strong tropical storm, but it may have a tougher time getting beyond that.
Yes, indeed. And Joe, I'm already. We've been on now for 50 minutes, and I'm already winded.
Yes. So on that note, I am actually, Joe. It's brightening up out here. I'm right on the intercoastal waterway. I don't know if I can get the camera, kind of see what my view is. So
You're right now, Joe. You're in Boynton Beach, and the man who stood for me as my best man at my wedding in 1984, Sam Storch, he also is in Boynton Beach. I don't know how close the two of you guys are relative to each other, but I was going to call him and say, so how's things over there? But now I know, based upon what you've been telling us, I pretty much know what's been going on that side of Florida. So
yeah, you can see the houses across the way with their canal there, and there's a canal. It's wide open. If I might be able to go out here. Hang on. Let's see. Oh, I'm not. These houses, Joe, are made of cement. I can't. Trying to figure. There we go. I don't know if you could. My wire doesn't. All right, I'm going to try to untangle this. Sometimes you have to do these technical things on the fly, folks. It's not pretty, but you deal. So I don't know if you could see here, but you could see the.
I see your door. I see your door jam right now. Oh, there you go.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to look on the computer to see what kind of what view it is, if I have the camera too high or too low. But can you see the intercoastal waterway there in the background?
Way in the background, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. I mean, it's roughed up a little bit, but it's nothing crazy. And the water's, we're on the East Coast here, so it was never going to be an issue with regards to storm surge. But I will tell you, when I woke up this morning, it was 82 degrees, okay, outside, and the humidity was ridiculous. It had to be close to 100%, and
the temperature is terrible, and the humidity is humiliating.
Pretty much. So there you have it. Just gonna fix my camera here. So yeah, we'll be back tonight at 7:30 Eastern time with updates on everything that's going on, and also just a reminder that the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town on everything you need, especially when it comes to getting ready to make sure you're home and you are prepared for adverse weather. The website is, Joe?
Oh, it's omnitruevalue.com, Joe.
All right, so everybody, we'll see you tonight at 7:30. Have a great afternoon. And if you're watching from from South Florida, and if you're watching from Southwest Florida, please stay safe. Hope everything goes okay while this hurricane moves inland, and that you'll find that if you've evacuated your home, hopefully you come back and everything is okay. It's all fixable. Okay. Bottom line is that's fixable. Your life is not fixable.
Correct.
So you can always fix your home. We'll see you tonight at 7:30.
Bye bye.